All right, so now that we've looked at seeing what happens when you use the pot, let's see what happens inside, because I'm curious. I have my handy dandy Leatherman tool I use to take apart many things, and definitely wear safety glasses when taking things apart. This is one of the reasons I always have them. Also, don't poke your eyes with a knife, because that's dumb. See? Don't do that. So I'm diving in. First thing I'm going to do is start loosening up these 4 points that seem to be sandwiching the front end together. That's my first point of entry just from observation. Yeah, and most of what I do when I take things apart is just observe and react, observe and react. I'm looking to see what moves, what doesn't, and the first thing that looks like I can deal with are these guys. So I go in, pry one off, see? And I'll go to my next one, which I'll probably go from the other side. Pry it. So now I've got 2 up. Anytime there's 4 contacts on things, unless they're like screwed in, a lot of times I can start pulling it out after I take off 3. So one of the first things I noticed when I took my first pot apart was these sandwich this whole system together, right? But what I thought was interesting and silly was this little lip that sticks up. And until I kept fiddling around with it, it didn't make sense. But it's something to observe, and what this little lip does is it is a physical stop from allowing the potentiometer to keep rotating all the way. So that, coupled with this piece right here, is actually inset from the edge, whereas the casing is right on the outside edge. So that's what tells me that this right here is what stops when I rotate this piece. Otherwise, it would be able to rotate all the way around. There's issues with that. Like one, if it's rotating all the way around and I skip this black material, which is the semi-conductive, then what I could do is create a short. And in my circuits, I like to plan accordingly for when I do strange things with hacking components. A couple other things we will note. These are the 3 leads. So 1, 2, 3. If I look on the other side, we can see that this is 1 right here. So 1 follows conductive material here up into this black material all the way around. So it keeps going, and then down to 3. So this right here physically does not change ever. Like as far as once it's there, it's on the board, that's what we're looking at. When we measured the 9.9 kilo ohms earlier, that's what the electricity is going through in its entirety. Now the middle one though, if you look close, it goes right through the middle up into here. Now the question is, how are we going to see that? Can I pull that forward? Can, but can't pull it back. Interesting. So let's see if I can't remove this piece. So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to cut these little flanges off, because it's looking like to me that it's what's holding the black piece in place, which is actually also holding this little spring in place. And I'm not sure if we can actually showcase it to the camera because it's so small. So I'm gonna see if I just can't remove these pieces. Yeah, boy. Well, broke that piece. Yeah. So when you take things apart, don't plan on them always being something you could put back together. But for the sake of learning, it's well worth it. Things to note: this piece, which is what I was cutting the end of it off, is a static piece. Like this is slid in there here, And there's no other moving parts. It's just a nice little circular fit. This threaded piece is used to usually hold it into a mounting piece, and that's it. Since this has a flat edge, that is what mates into here so that it stays consistent with the rotation. So you'll see that in a lot of components where if it has to rotate, you have a flat edge. With 3D printers, for instance, the shaft of the NEMA 17s or 23s or whatever tend to be a D shaft so that you can put a set screw right against the flat edge. So that's something that you'll see as you take more stuff apart or just start observing what's already open and available. The most fascinating part is how these two pieces interact. So let's look at this one first. We've got what I said before where we have pin 1 all the way around to pin 3 is a consistent change over time, right? So this is going to be our 10K, but this middle piece goes to a ring that hugs just inside of the semiconductive material, but it doesn't actually touch it. It is just providing a ring of conductive surface, and that's ultimately, when we deal with electronics, what we're managing is conductive surfaces or voltages and how they are affected by these conductive surfaces or semiconductors. So with that being said, let's look at the next piece. And the next piece is all kinds of fun. This little spring section right here that comes up off center is the contact that actually rides on that inner circle. So that is our first point of contact from this pin. Physically goes into the inner circle, which is all conductive material for that pin. And this little piece right here is what continues that conductive or that contact. Now that goes through this piece of metal, which is one solid piece of metal. So the whole thing now, just from this point of contact, is now tied into contact with that. What happens next though is the shape of this piece that is sprung outside of the ring is actually what comes down. If you can see the shape, is what comes down and touches the surface of the semiconductive circle. And that's what allows us to split everything in between from 0 to 10K just by rotating where this little bent piece is making contact. Because we now know the circle has a point of contact with one spring pin, and then the outside has 3. And the reason that there's 3, to my guess, is to have a bit of redundancy. So if any one of those breaks, you still have contact on that surface. So the pot still works. And that's going to end it for potentiometers. If you have any questions, leave them down below. We will be more than happy to dive down this rabbit hole with you. Have a good day.